After a few years of being released and with a brand new sequel getting developed, Breath of the Wild is highly regarded as one of the best Zelda games of all time. Maybe even the best game period. But does it deserve it? I'm gonna skip the theatrics and suspense, because I'm sure by reading the title of this video you've already worked out that my opinion of this critically acclaimed game does not mesh well with the consensus of many others. You guys aren't idiots. You know these things. Breath of the Wild is overrated as hell. That being said, however, Breath of the Wild is not overrated because it's a bad game. It's actually overrated because it's too good. In fact, I really enjoyed this game. It was extremely fun and I had a blast playing it. It looks so good. The physics are so fluid and smooth, and the sheer beauty of this game is simply unmatched. The characters were amazing, the cutscenes were unbelievable, and the ability to free roam and do things in whatever order was so refreshing. However, these things can blind the player with a false hype, leading them to believe that this game is actually perfect, when in fact it is missing key ingredients that made Zelda what it is today. And unfortunately, because of this, Breath of the Wild eventually becomes a victim of its own success upon completion of the game. Call me greedy, but the main reason I consider it to be overrated is because it's too short and it lacks meaningful content. Now there are tons of content in this game, but most of it was useless filler in the form of core exceeds and diaries that the majority of gamers would not get to unless they used a guide on YouTube. And let's be honest, who wants to sniff every corner of a ruined village that was copied and pasted 30 times and spread around the overworld, just looking for a book, seed, or mediocre weapon or prize, like a traveler's sword or a piece of amber? Not this guy. It gets old after about the third time. But the biggest sore thumb of the game that sticks out a waving flag and shouting at my disappointment is the main storyline. The main story did take a while to complete, but it was upsetting when the completion of the 4th Divine Beast was done and the next step was to take on the main boss. In almost every other 3D Zelda game with the exception of Majora's Mask, there is a second wind to the game. A story event that occurs and changes the path of the protagonist mid-game and says, "Hang on buddy,
we're not done yet!"
This is a trait also adopted by many music artists who make it look like their song will end, but right before it dies out, the song comes back for one last amazing chorus. In Twilight Princess, after obtaining the Fused Shadows, the game makes you believe that you're almost done. You've got what you're looking for. You're ready to take on the villain and oh shit! Plot twist! Zant gets the jump on you, steals your loot, butchers your sidekick, leaving her for dead, changing you back into a wolf. Sorry son, but you've got a lot more adventuring to do. Some people might get upset with this strategy, but when it first happened to me I was thinking, wow, this game is so fun, too bad it's over so soon. You can only imagine my response when this cutscene took place and I realized that I wasn't done yet and I had more game to play. And the second phase of Zelda dungeons tend to be better than the first ones, which is ultimately what got me to love the series. Sadly, this wasn't done in Breath of the Wild. And sure, I'm kind of to blame for this, seeing as how I went into the game expecting this to happen as the entitled piece of shit that I am. But when it didn't have a second wind, it disappointed me, and I was kind of turned off of the game. I was ready to fight Ganon at the castle with the percentage of completion on the map only saying 37%. Does anybody have a calculator? Because this just doesn't add up. Most of the rest of the game suffers from the same fate, but in Nintendo's defense, they were trying out a lot of new things, and you know what? They actually did a pretty damn good job. Most people seem to love what they did. Now maybe I just don't like change that much, or maybe I just see the bigger picture and the potential of what this game could have been. But let's get one thing straight. I did enjoy this game. It was fun. I was happy with it. During the first playthrough, it had contendership for my favorite Zelda title. But after completion and replays, it became more and more clear that things just weren't quite right. It was still amazing, but not as good as everyone makes it out to be. Breath of the Wild could be better. Close, but no cigar, if you will. Which got me thinking on just how it could be improved in later games, to be the undisputed Zelda of Zelda titles. A game that would blow the minds of millions and make Ocarina of Time
look like a picnic. Bloody hell.
If this were to be done, a few tweaks of Breath of the Wild need to be made.
I am going to Kermit Suicide!
In a game where we have an enormous world to explore in any order we want, the feeling of exploration is magnified. Gone are the days of the hand-holding, do-things-in-order adventures. However, this comes at a cost. The more open a world is, the more it lacks storyline. And to some, this isn't such a big deal. But to many of us, if there's no plot or reason to go on this quest, then the adventure doesn't mean as much as it could. When the story is fantastic, It makes the quest a lot more personal and meaningful. Now there are ways to fix this without restricting too many freedoms. Most Zelda games already do this to an extent, and this goes back to my main point of having a second or third wind to the plot. Breaking the game into thirds will still allow for a great storyline and plot progression to occur at each checkpoint. Kinda like in Twilight Princess. You spend the first part of your adventure acquiring the fused shadows. Then you break for a storyline moment, and then proceed to get the mirror shards. But instead of doing each temple in a set order, the fused shadow dungeons can be done in any order that you want. But they all need to be completed before tackling the mirror shard dungeons, which once you get to them could also be done in any order that you want. Until you hit the next storyline checkpoint. Rinse and repeat this as long as you want. In fact, rinse it until it's dry. A Link Between Worlds executes this perfectly, by having a couple of temples that can be done in any random order before acquiring the Master Sword. Then afterwards there's a main storyline dungeon that needs to be done, followed by several more temples that can also be done in any random order. This way we can keep the free roam feel without sacrificing storyline and purpose to the game. This isn't Grand Theft Auto, and open world free roam games can't get much better than just mediocre without having a strong story and a reason to complete it. This is The Legend of Zelda, and it should be nagging at the back of your mind to save the princess and kill the villain instead of just, I feel like screwing around. There is a time and place for this, however, and this is where the side quests come into play. There is a ton of collectibles and side quests in Breath of the Wild, but I tend to find only a very select few memorable. Like, I can count them on one hand. And while it's nice to have an abundance of side quests and collectibles, if you can't remember their significance, you might as well have just been sniffing paint, because you end up at the same destination, remembering nothing and wondering what you're doing with your life. It's a gross, empty feeling. When it comes to side quests, less is more. We all remember just how impactful the Anju and Cafe quest was for Majora's Mask, and one of the main reasons for this was how every little detail of that quest was packed to the brim with quality. It's been 20 years since the release of Majora's Mask, and people still remember most, if not all, of the side quests from that game. Breath of the Wild is still fresh in the brain, but most people will struggle coming up with a few memorable quests from it. And it has 15 times the amount to choose from. Quality over quantity is important here, folks. The less space taken up by pointless things, the more you can focus and add on to the good ones that actually matter. Aside from the side quests, the collectibles could have used some more TLC. The armor selection was a nice new mechanic that I really enjoyed, because 1, you get to customize Link for however you want him to look, and 2, each piece of clothing serves a bonus purpose. I love how they broke down each armor set into 3 pieces, one for the head, body, and boots. But when you have 2 different pieces or sets of armor that do the exact same thing, it seems pretty pointless and a waste of inventory space. Especially since most of them were just adding another stage of elemental protection, with no added benefit for each individual piece. An exception of this, however, was the Zora armor. Each piece had its own special benefit, like the ability to swim up waterfalls and use the spin attack, while the suit as a whole outfit had an entirely different power-up, like increased swimming speed, then amplified further by the Great Fairy. This is how all armor sets should have been. Why in the fuck would I want a Rito boot that does nothing but add another layer of warmth, yet it can't tread the snow fast? Then later in the game you get a winter snow boot that makes you sift on the snow, yet it doesn't protect you against the cold. This makes it irritating as all hell to fight that damn Lionel in the Hebrew region, constantly switching from the snow boots to the Rito boots over and over and back and forth in between sword swings and dodges. And people praise this system, yet can't get over how frustrating the switching of iron boots is in Ocarina of Time's Water Temple. Imagine all armor sets, with each piece having its own special perk, and the full outfit with its own special use when worn as a set. Now all 4 benefits with the power of the Great Fairy can become even stronger yet with each upgrade, not just after the second upgrade as a full suit. There's that cheap, meaningless filler content again, forcing you to grab collectibles for no reward. Just picture the Goron fire armor. The boots are immune to heat, just like normal. Go visit a fairy, now you can walk in the fire. Go talk to another fairy, boom! Now you're immune to lava in these boots. See another one yet? Now you can walk on the lava like a Goron Jesus! And there's still another 4th fairy level to go. Lava swimming, anyone? And the Goron tunic can be used for strength upgrades, just like the Gorons, going from power bracelet strength to gauntlet strength after each fairy use, while still granting a fire resistance level, because that's initially its purpose when you first receive the fire armor. And that still leaves the helmet part of the set, which I'm not going to provide examples for because that's something for a later video, so send me some of your ideas in the comment section below, and I might use them in a later video on this topic.
Fuck me.
With the defense covered, it's the offense's turn to pass the Mabus test. And while I do like the variety of weapons from each race and different enemies, the durability of all the weapons can sometimes be a pain. Most people didn't like the breakable weapons, but I think they could actually work out both in gameplay and story-wise. Keep everything the same. Abundance, durability, arrow cost, etc. But this time, when you receive a special item like the Great Eagle's Bow, you get a little added perks and features. After all, it is a champion's weapon, and it was crafted by excellence. It should be better. For starters, it doesn't break. Ever. I know in Breath of the Wild you could just make a new one, but because of it eventually breaking, I was always afraid to use it and enjoy it, defeating the purpose of even having it entirely. In addition to its indestructible nature, give it a special bonus feature that other bows don't have, like shooting special or multiple arrows with just the cost of one normal arrow. Hell, you could even bring back the trusty magic meter that we haven't seen in a 3D game since the Wind Waker to help power that special ability. Not only that, but bring it to the respective weaponsmith or the Great Fairy, or even a minigame afterwards in the Rito village to help power it up. Oh, the possibilities! This way you can still use all Breath of the Wild's usual weapons like before, but this time you can actually use the good stuff without the fear of it breaking. Plus, it actually feels like a reward this way. So much better. Personally, one of my favorite parts of Breath of the Wild that I think Nintendo nailed with flying colors was the addition of supporting characters with major roles from every different race in the game, and the voice acting to go with it. Even each race had their own preferred weapon type, and a signature weapon for each champion. Very well done. That's the less is more quality that I'm looking for. But with all the different regions in the vast game of Breath of the Wild, it was disappointing that there wasn't more races that inhabited them, or even existed at all. Off the top of my head, I can probably name close to 10 or so races that could have been used for each region, and give most of them their respective enemies, elemental benefits, and equipment. Move the Rito more skyward and focus on wind puzzles and flight. Bring back the Inuki for the Hebrew region that was so cold. Have the Kikwis for the Faron Rainforest, and the Mogmas Sheikah for Twilight for the Thyflo region. Keep the Koroks at the Forgotten Woods. But give me the Skyward Sword robots for the Thunder region and Electricity. Gorons for Fire, Gerudo for Desert and Sand, Zora for Water, each with their respective problems to solve and enemies to fight. Like the Icicle foes to defeat for the Inuki in the Hebrew region, and their respective elemental armor and tactics for each zone. Could you imagine weapons like Mipha's Lightscale Trident from the Zoras, that when powered up and with the help of the magic meter, has a built-in harpoon gun that doubles as a claw shot? Just how much would something like that help Link climb mountains more quickly? Add that to the Mogma armor, that after powering it up, not only digs, but has the ability to climb on slippery surfaces. And when you can choose the order of these dungeons, these side items compound to be a ridiculous force, changing the difficulty of each temple to be either a walk in the park or incredibly difficult, which in turn would make the replayability of this game different every single time. Speaking of the dungeons, I don't think I'm the first one to point out that I would rather have the traditional dungeons for each race and region rather than the divine beasts. It just doesn't feel like Zelda, and quite frankly, neither do the shrines. I want dungeons and mini-dungeons to be mysterious and unique for each region and race. After going through a few of the shrines, the mystique disappears, and we all know what they are, why they're there, and what to expect. And ultimately, they just become a chore. But if you break down the game into segments, add unique, useful items, a great story that keeps you immersed in the adventure, and a couple of meaningful mini-dungeons and side quests, you'll end up with one humding-a-linger of a game. This has been Mabus. Nintendo had all the right pieces with Breath of the Wild, but they didn't quite put them together correctly in the puzzle. Which bothered me because I know how good Nintendo is and what exactly they're capable of. This is why Breath of the Wild was both disappointing and overrated to me. That being said though, after testing the limits and trying new things with Breath of the Wild, I have more than enough faith in the big end to get things right in the sequel. And I'm sure they will most definitely polish out any of the kinks that I mentioned. I'm looking forward to the next game. But until then, all we can do is speculate and wait. So in the meantime and in between time, stay tuned for more.